Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Lord, and thank you so much for joining us for this post-cabinet media briefing this morning. We will be addressed by the Attorney General and the Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Dale Marshall, as well as the Minister of Home Affairs and Information, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams. My colleagues in the media are also present here at Ilara Court this morning, and Minister Abrams will begin.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the first in our resumption of the post-cabinet press conferences. As you are aware, the government had committed to bridging the gap between the citizens of Barbados and the executive, and to try to demystify a lot of what happens in cabinet. We had started with post-cabinet press conferences early in our first term, but with COVID, things slipped a little bit. It became difficult to arrange press conferences. A lot of emergency action was happening behind the scenes with government. Cabinet meetings really had no end time. They all began at 10 o'clock, but sometimes they run 8, 9, 10, up to midnight. So it became very difficult to schedule the press conferences. So what then ended up happening is you had a lot of side ministerial conferences, press conferences where ministers would come on and they would do their own thing and speak about what was going on in their ministry or any decisions taken in their ministry. And it was a little bit more ad hoc. But that was as a result of the circumstances that we were faced with at that time. Things have settled down a lot now. We've gotten back to some measure of regularity in how we conduct our dealings. We are back to face-to-face press conferences, so they're no longer virtual. So you can't see from that shot, but the media is very well represented in this particular press conference. The aim of the press conference, as I said, is to focus on what was decided in cabinet. We are unlikely to have them every single week because a lot of what happens in cabinet is run-of-the-mill governmental stuff, the decisions that have to be taken to make government function and government run. We are committing to having press conferences at least once every 2 weeks. If for some reason something earth-shattering happens in a particular cabinet meeting, then we will come to you the next day on the Friday to discuss what happened there. And the reason as well that we shifted from Thursday to Friday is, I know some of you have complained that you see a press conference is going to happen at a certain time and it doesn't. It is very hard for us to control what the timetabling of cabinet because of how cabinet is. We could schedule a press conference at 4 o'clock. And all 7 o'clock, the thing that we intended to speak to you about is still being discussed, and a decision has not been reached, or we have not finalized exactly what we're going to say in relation to it. So the decision has been taken for your benefit, for the comfort of the media, and for us to be able to present a more cohesive presentation or analysis of what it is we want to talk to you about, that we're going to do the post-cabinet press conferences on the following day. That would be the Friday after the cabinet meeting for which the conference relates. So having said all of that, this is our first one. We welcome you back. We look forward to engaging with you. We have nothing to hide. The cabinet is the business of the people. And quite often, following the cabinet meetings, you then see the results of what the cabinet meeting was about weeks down or maybe months down as a bill comes to Parliament, as some other decision is taken, as somebody is appointed finally. And you learn after the fact. What we're trying to do is give you that information a little bit closer up. Give you the information while it's relevant, give you the information effectively hot off the press. So this is not a general application press conference. The aim of these press conferences is to discuss and share with you critical decisions that were made in cabinet which impact you or affect you, or which the government feels that we need to share with the people of Barbados following the cabinet meeting. So I hope I've set the context and in some way manage your expectation. And as I've said, we're committing to the regularity of these press conferences because we feel it is necessary to take you into our confidence, that you don't think things happening behind closed doors are mysterious. It is the business of the government. So we are going to share with you as much as we can. We're going to answer the questions. The press will know to expect these, as I said, once every 2 weeks. And this is the first one. So welcome back and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Minister Abrams. Attorney General.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to those of you whom I have not seen since the year opened up. The Minister of Information has therefore passed all the rest of the gauntlet to me. From time to time, I imagine that as Attorney General, I would be present to participate in these meetings, in these press conferences, hopefully largely because there will be some element of the discussion that would involve legislation that is proposed for introduction into Parliament. Of course, it will not always be major pieces of legislation, and I don't anticipate that with every minor amendment it would trigger this kind of discussion. But I imagine that for our first for the year, and given the importance of one of the items of legislation, it is quite fitting that it would be presented to you in some way today. And I speak first of all of the reintroduction to Parliament of the Integrity in Public Life Bill. This will now be the Integrity in Public Life Bill of 2023. You will recall that this government, in its manifesto of 2018, committed to introducing in very short order integrity in public life legislation. We did so, but we felt that this kind of legislation represented such a change in how public life would be conducted, how it would be perceived, that we felt it was important to have a full consultative process which involved the Select Committee of Parliament. That Select Committee reported back in 2020, and if any of you have trouble to look at that particular report, you will know that it consisted of almost 800 pages of report. I mentioned that to begin by making the point that we have had a fulsome consultative process with the people of Barbados. That consultation included the legal profession, it included all of the political parties, it included activists, it included the Integrity Association of Barbados, and a fairly significant spread of the Barbadian community, all of whom have as their central, as an item of central importance, committing Barbados to having the highest standards in public life, free from corruption. I'll remind you that as we went into 2018, Barbados was rated very, very low on the I think it was called the corruption index. In other words, the reputation of Barbados had been sullied to the point where we were perceived as a country where corruption was rampant. We have significantly improved our rating on that particular index, and now I believe that we are probably either at the top of the Caribbean or very near to the top of the Caribbean. And that has come through a significant amount of work so that the international community and the local community recognizes that we are committed to rooting out corruption. That being said, and even though we have been successful in removing much of that stain and taint from our reputation, the legislative framework for conduct in public life has always been important. Unfortunately, our efforts to bring this legislation to Parliament were derailed in two ways. First of all, even though it received unanimous support in the lower house, it did not receive the support in the Senate that required it to be passed. Because of some of the provisions of this bill, it's being passed in accordance with certain specific provisions of the Constitution, which acknowledges that it would involve some constitutional ramification, if not constitutional amendment. Unfortunately, the independent senators and the opposition senators, as they then were, did not approve the bill, and because of the requirement to pass it in accordance with the constitutional provisions, we needed to have a two-thirds majority, so we did not secure that two-thirds majority in the Senate. So the bill was defeated in the Senate. Even though we could have brought it back, you might remember that Parliament was prorogued very shortly thereafter, and therefore the bill as it stood died with that particular sitting of Parliament. We took the opportunity after that to come back to the bill to tweak a number of things, particularly those issues that were troublesome for the independent senators in particular and the opposition senators. And we spent quite a bit of time trying to make sure that we got it right. In the meantime, as well, we've transitioned from being a constitutional monarchy to being a republic, and the bill as it used to be was replete with references, of course, to the Crown and to the Governor General, as that office was then constituted. So a number of things have happened in the interim. We have changed up the bill to reflect the change from a monarchical system to our current Republican style, and we've addressed those issues that were of importance to the Senate. Perhaps, and while I probably should not be the judge of it, perhaps the most important element that received the criticism from the Senate had to do with the position of judges. The independent senators and the opposition senators were of the view that judges of the High Court should not be excluded from the requirements of the integrity and public life legislation. And while I think we understand what that sentiment comes from, and while we understand the importance of the appearance that no one is above the law, there are still some constitutional realities that we have to face. In Trinidad, when they sought to make their judges subject to the provisions of their integrity legislation, a High Court suit was filed contending that that statute was unconstitutional because it sought to impose a number of restrictions, including punitive restrictions on the High Court judges of Trinidad and Tobago at the time. For those reasons, the court found that the statute constituted a change in the terms and conditions of the judges that was negative, and therefore it ran afoul of the Constitution. In addition to that, because it introduced another method of supervision in relation to their judges, it was felt that was another limb on which that bill could not be sustained. We've carefully analyzed the Trinidadian provisions. Trinidad and Barbados have the same common law heritage, and our constitutions are very similar, and it is therefore fair to conclude that such a challenge would be received and supported by our courts if we sought to make our High Court judges subject to the provisions of the integrity legislation. We think that we've reached a reasonable compromise. In my view, it would be distinctly unconstitutional, if you ever needed an adjective for that, to try to impose these obligations on our current judges, but there's nothing wrong with imposing them on future appointed judges as a condition of their appointment. And therefore, the bill, as Cabinet has approved it and as it will be laid in Parliament on Tuesday, will obligate future appointed judges, future appointed directors of public prosecution, future appointed auditors general, because all of those have the same constitutional protection now. So individuals who come to these offices after the passing of the bill will be subject to the requirements of the integrity and public life legislation. I think that's the only way of addressing it, but to have tried to impose it on the current holders of any of these offices, judges, DPP, we know I mean Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Auditor General, would be to breach their constitutional protection, and we simply did not want to flirt with that. So that is perhaps the most important feature of the Integrity and Public Life Bill. There were one or two other minor elements that the Senate had concerned about, and we've changed those. So I'm satisfied that the bill as presented today would satisfy not just what we require, but would satisfy the requirements of a Senate now passed. I can't say to you what view the current Senate will take of it. We simply have to see how that goes. Some of the senators who served in that Senate remain, and I hope that they will find that the provisions that we've made will be to their satisfaction. I'm happy to be able to say to the public that Cabinet has agreed to bring this back. I'm constantly contacted by the members of Integrity Barbados to ask what is the status of this bill. I'm sure that from time to time on your social media posts you would see continuing agitation for the introduction of integrity legislation, and I'm pleased that we are at a place now where we can bring it back to the people of Barbados. It will, even though we've done very well in terms of cleaning up a number of things and helping to repair our name and reputation, it's an important signal to everybody that we are insisting that politicians like myself, like Wilfred, all of us, people who hold high public office, senior public servants, that we are all held to the highest possible standard when it comes to integrity in public life. The other matter which is coming to Parliament is perhaps of significantly less importance, but importance nonetheless. I think that everyone will have noticed increasingly in recent times that a large segment of the Barbadian society has been agitating about the nuisance of loud kites flying over their houses at night. Some of you here, or perhaps none of you here, suffer from that particular bother, but I've seen it reported in your media pages. There are a number of associations, I don't remember their name, no disrespect intended by that, but they've agitated for a change in the law, or in fact for an introduction of some law to limit this particular noise problem. We have heard their cries, and we asked the Law Reform Commission to take a look at this particular issue. The Law Reform Commission did do a report perhaps about 18 months or so ago, and recommended that we make some amendments to the Minor Offences Act, rather than enacting a new piece of legislation dealing with specifically kites. So we make some amendments to the Minor Offences Act, and we are therefore going to be laying in Parliament on Tuesday a piece of legislation which for the first time will attempt to bring some abatement to that dreadful nuisance that affects so many Barbadians. And to tell you in essence what this bill is going to provide, it will provide that, but to put it in simple terms, you can fly a kite for as long as you want, so long as it does not have a bull. To put it quite simply, because we all know that is what keeps the noise, and that is what causes the nuisance. So we're saying that you can, if you fly a kite with a bull, and my researchers have told me that the correct name for it is bull roarer. Curious, but that is apparently, if you are into kites, you would know that that's where the term bull comes from. So the essence of this then is that at 7 o'clock in the night, that kite has to come down, and it cannot be flown again until 6 the next morning. So that between 7 at night and 6 in the morning, any person who flies a kite with a bull or any other kind of noise-making apparatus will find themselves afoul of the law. They will be subject on summary conviction to a fine of $5,000 or possibly to imprisonment. But you would know that this administration has taken the view that we really need to get out of this whole thing about locking up people all of the time, and therefore this involves a ticketing element. If you are found contravening the law, you will get a fixed penalty, and that fixed penalty is $500. So you pay the penalty, no issue. If on the other hand you insist on proceeding to court, then of course you may find yourself subject to the full penalties of the law, as determined by the magistrate who hears the matter.
Don't pay.
Or if you don't pay. So essentially, while this may seem small in the scheme of things, I know that I have received numerous letters from Barbadians who complain about the noise. The kite seems to sit directly above their house and is up all night, and they simply cannot sleep. And while for many of us that may seem like a small thing, for the individual who has to suffer this particular indignity, it is grave and can also have serious effects on their health. I hope that we don't have to use it. I'm asking that Barbadians be reasonable and take down their kites at night. I really don't want us to have to be dispatching members of the police force to be trying to enforce this kind of legislation. They have better things to do, to put it that way, but they have to protect all of the rights of Barbadians, even though they may seem perhaps of a different kind. And while we don't generally have noise legislation in Barbados, this we think is going to go a long way towards satisfying the need for peace and tranquility for our citizens who are trying to get some rest at night. So those are the two pieces of legislation that Cabinet yesterday approved. They'll be laid in Parliament on Tuesday and will be debated fairly shortly thereafter. But that's a matter that will be fixed by the parliamentary agenda and the leader of government business in the House. And with those, Minister Abrams, I don't think I have anything else to add.
We could open for questions, but I'd just like to start by introducing my colleagues first. We have Marlon Madden from Barbados Today, Colville Mounsey from Nation News, Katrina King, Loop News, Crystal White, CBC, and Lorraine Graham Carter from Starcom Network. Your questions.
Good morning, Colville Mounsey from Nation News. I think you would have touched base on it a little, but I would like you to go into a little further detail. It's been 3 years, basically, since the legislation failed to pass the Senate. And there has been strong criticism about the length of time that it has taken to come back. Could you enlighten the public a little further as to why it took this length of time to get back here?
Well, I don't want to be to ring the COVID bell all of the time. But the fact is that passing this legislation will immediately require us to establish a commission, okay? That commission is going to require a significant amount of public resources because it's going to be a body corporate. It must have its own, it will have its CEO, it will have to have its dedicated staff, it will have to have its own offices, but of a special importance is the fact that given what it is dealing with, we have to put measures in place that you would not normally have to put in place for any other body. So, for example, if you were the chairman of the Broadcast Authority, for example, you would have to file your declaration of assets. We are guaranteeing you that there will be the fullest level of privacy possible for your data, okay? So you will file your declaration. It has to be dealt with by people who have to be vetted in accordance with the national vetting policy. And by vetting, we're talking about true verification, because we want individuals who are working there to subscribe to the highest possible standards as well. Your information has to be dealt with in a way that's secure. It has to be saved in a way that's secure. The computer systems that are going to be required for this particular entity have to have the highest level of security available. So we recognize that it would require a tremendous effort to put this commission in place to meet the highest possible prudential standards that are required. In the middle of COVID, we simply did not have the breathing space in many directions, really, to be able to bring this to the table. In addition to that, At that point in time, Parliament we were in a different location for much of the time. We were meeting in hybrid format. So there were a whole set of other issues that concerned us. Yes, it is true that at the time when the bill was brought to the Senate and was defeated, it was COVID. But in terms of a decision to bring it back, we knew when it was defeated in 2020 that we had to give it some breathing space. We had to take time to make the amendments. Then we had to consider what we would require in order to fully activate it. And to be fair, it did come back before Parliament towards the end of the year, but we then had some discussions among a small cabinet subcommittee and so on to make sure that we were ready. So I think there were a number of factors, but let me make it clear that the time that it took is not indicative at all of any kind of reluctance on our part to get it to Parliament. We committed to this when we were in opposition. We were not satisfied with the legislation that the last party put on the table, and we said that we were going to bring it. I understand that integrity legislation is not necessarily going to be the most popular thing. It isn't. It is going to require individuals who before would not have had to disclose any of their assets or the assets of their spouses or the assets of their children. It will require a completely different way of looking at what we do. So we took time to get it back, but it really could not be viewed from a point of view of dragging our feet or delay. We wanted to make sure we got it right, but we also wanted to make sure that when we brought it, that we were bringing it to the people of Barbados at a time when we felt that we were going to be able to put the resources behind it to establish it. In other words, this is not going to be a piece of legislation that will be passed, but then the commission don't get set up for 4 years.
You would have mentioned, now that you mentioned it, a few ancillary things that have to be put in place,
Yes.
data protection, etc. Are all those things now in place?
I didn't say data protection had to be put in place. I said that in preparing for bringing this bill and activating it, there are issues including how we protect your data. And I'm not necessarily talking about data protection under the Data Protection Act. There's going to be a declaration that has to be filed, and when you file it, you don't want to see it appearing on social media, do you? Well, not you, but you understand.
Right, so basically these ancillary things that you were mentioning then, are they now fully in place?
Well, we're working towards them. But the important thing is that we needed to have the space and the absence of the distraction to be able to focus on them. So I think that coming to the country with it at this time, as long as it is passed in both houses, we'll be in a position to fully activate the commission.
Final question from me on this
Minor offences bill? Kite flying bill?
The integrity legislation.
Oh.
I have a few other questions I want to ask you after as well. You mentioned that you made a tweak as it relates to the aspect, the applicability to judges. Now,
That's more than a tweak, though, but go ahead.
yeah, okay, fair enough. Now, basically, are you going to just more than hope that the independent senators are going to find this adjustment amenable? Or is it? Or have you sent out some feelers? What have you done to ensure that this time around it should pass?
Well, the bill has only now been approved by cabinet. It was approved by cabinet yesterday. Okay, so I couldn't. None of us could be saying to independent senators, "This is what we're going to be bringing back to Parliament," because it was only approved by cabinet yesterday. Let me just say that I guess we've seen the American way of practicing politics and reaching across the political divide so much in recent times that we wonder if there isn't any opportunity to do that here. We have had, on various occasions, discussions with independent and opposition senators to see if they had any challenges with the bill. With several bills, I've gone down to Parliament myself to discuss troublesome piece of legislation with independent senators in the past, and if required, I anticipate that we will do so now. I hope that it isn't going to be a major challenge. As I said, we had a significant public consultation. Some of those senators are still in the Senate. If it becomes necessary to have a discussion, to explain to them what we're doing, and to give them a level of comfort, I and Minister Abrams and others of my colleagues are more than happy to. We have not been conducting the business of the Senate in a way that's adversarial, especially since we have all of the votes in the lower house. It's important to engage fully the members of the Senate in as much as they represent other aspects of Barbados. So you've asked me what we've done. We haven't done anything yet. But now that the bill is going to go back before the Parliament, I don't anticipate it's going to be debated in the next week or two. So they will certainly have enough time to discuss it. And I commit publicly that if they have any issues that they want to discuss, I'm more than happy to discuss with them to give them a level of comfort.
I have a follow-up to that question.
Just one sec, we're going to pass the mic to Marlon so you can hear his question.
Okay, thanks. I have a follow-up to that question. I want to find, you said you met with a number of stakeholders. So in relation to the change that we made for the judges, or future judges and DPPs, what have you been hearing then from the association, for the Bar Association, for example?
Well, so please, let me make it clear. I was recapping the history of the bill. And in the history of the bill, we had those consultations, and the Bar made representations to the committee, Integrity Barbados and others. On this particular measure, we've not had any specific consultation with the Bar or with any other entity. It is a matter that we are aware the independent senators had a particular view on, and their view was that judges should be included. It's not a view I could support in law, so we've done the next best thing. So in that particular situation, what you're doing is we're adding more than we had. So in my view, in a situation where you are bringing more people into the umbrella, there wasn't a specific need to consult with them about broadening the reach of the legislation. So we've not done that consultation at this point in time. But I can say to you that the matter of judges being subject to the Constitution, to the provisions, came up during the Select Committee. So it was discussed during the Select Committee. So we've already, in essence, had that consultation. And in fact, you will see, if you looked at that particular report, you will see a number of the cases and so on that we had to consider attached to the report. So the legal side of things was already fully considered at that time.
You had a follow-up question, Marlon?
No, I have another question. It's not related to the bills that we're introducing, but I want to find out, with the budget around the corner, and I'm sure you guys have been having your consultations, I want to find out from both of you if you've been seeking an increase in order to address certain issues within your ministries, let's say.
Well, I'd prefer to say that we are busily engaged in the estimates process. At present, and Minister Abrams has already had a meeting this morning, I think, with the Prime Minister and the members of the Ministry of Finance. I go back again today. It is a constant process. I'd prefer not to disclose what my ministry is asking for, but suffice to say that whatever resources government has, our expectation is that they will be equitably distributed across the ministry so that we can carry out the mandate of the government. In some instances, that may require an increase. In other instances, it may not. You will be able to see when the estimates are published and when you come to Parliament, because once more we'll be continuing that new tradition of ministries being in what we call the proverbial well of Parliament to face questions from MPs. So in due course you'll know, and I believe that we are looking at doing the estimates in middle of February, so it's just another 2 weeks away.
But in terms of this current financial year, would you say that you had areas that you would have needed more support, let's say financially?
Well, I can speak for the Attorney General's office. There are always areas in which, as things evolve, you will recognize you need more government resources. So, for example, and I really don't want us to broaden the scope of this morning's discussion too much, and I know if I start to discuss certain things, then we open the door. But if I take then the Ministry of Home Affairs, who had to deal with the after effects of a hurricane, and who continues still to deal with the after effects of a hurricane and preparing for another hurricane season. There are always going to be issues that you feel you need to do more in. Certainly in my ministry, there are areas that we can identify we need more resources. We think we need more resources. For the police, for example, we've had to deal with putting additional manpower out there for a longer period of time. So that will require a consideration of overtime and allowances and so on. But this is natural in government. You prepare a budget, but you always have to be flexible enough to deal with it. Now, one of the things that you might not readily be aware of is that it may not require you to go to the Ministry of Finance to seek more funding. It may be, the situation may readily be resolved by moving funding from an area where your expenditure is going to be less than you had anticipated into an area of greater expenditure. And that is something that we in both of our ministries do every day. We call it environment. So you don't necessarily need a particular element may require more funds, and then you just prioritize. So you may say, well, we can put this one on the back burner and move money from here to go to this particular line item. And Mr. Mounsey is chomping at the bit.
Well, yes, Mr. Marshall. Since my colleague opened the door, I think I would jump right through as well.
No. Your colleague wiggled the lock. I'm not conceding that any door has been opened, but feel free to wiggle it.
Okay. On the issues of legislations that have been shelved for some time.
Shelved?
Put on the back burner for some time and have
well, as long as you tell me what you mean, because I'm not going to let you get away with generalities and try to answer.
Understood. There have been calls for breathalyzers, breathalyzer legislation, which has been on the back burner for some time. Could you give us an update on the status of that?
As far as I know, the legislation is already there. I think what you were talking about is the implementation of the actual breathalyzer testing.
Correct.
And yeah. As far as I recall, in a very wide-ranging discussion with the media, including you, or members of your particular media house, the Minister of Public Works, which is the ministry responsible for the implementation of the breathalyzer, made it quite clear that there were some matters which don't relate to law at all or law enforcement at all, which in our judgment we felt we needed to put in place so as to make sure that when we impose this system that we don't have the unintended consequence of chaos on our roads. And I think she more than ably explained that we were in the process of developing and rolling out an app which would benefit people who, like Minister Abrams, who may decide to leave his car at home, when he goes out fetting. He will know exactly what it will cost to get him from here to there, and he can take steps to deal with that. So no legislation has been shelved. The last administration passed that law. The people passed the responsibility to us, and Minister Bradshaw, Deputy Prime Minister, I'm quite sure explained fully where we were on that.
Final question from me. We have had just in recent days, two back-to-back shootings. And we have heard from the police that the current program that has been rolled out, the joint effort with the Barbados Defence Force, is bearing some success. There has been a lull, but we have now seen these two shootings. Do you still hold to the position that the plan is working as prescribed?
Of course I do. You know, if you are saying that a plan is a failure because something happens once, then probably all of our lives are failures.
Including yours.
In every single element of human endeavor, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where it is possible to maintain a state of perfection at all times. You know, in the 70s, the murder rate in Barbados had at one point reached a grand total of 20. Now, the 70s was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we had a murder rate of 20. Now, let's be frank. Unless we are going to impose a police state, and even in a police state, you will find that there will be breaches of the law. Okay? No police force could so regulate its society that it will have it would mean that each of us will have a police assigned to us. And then we probably fight with the police. And you hear that is a failure because I had to cuff the police. So, you know, let's not be unrealistic. Things happen. In our entire history, we've always had situations where there were lulls, there were peaks, some things happen, you know, but that does not mean that the plan is not working. You know, in many elements of our international exposure, we are called on to give an account for why Barbados did not meet a particular threshold. And if you think about human trafficking, for example, we've been asked, well, why have you had no human trafficking convictions? As if there is some magic number of convictions that you're supposed to have to show that your plan is working. Our plan is working. Perhaps too well. Perhaps sometimes there may be an incident of human trafficking, but because of an incident, I'm not prepared to declare that our efforts are a failure. Very, very far from. I'm satisfied with the extraordinary effort that is being put in by the members of the police service and conjointly with the Barbados Defence Force. It is taking a lot of their effort. It is taking a lot of their personal sacrifice. While many of us were enjoying picnics and fetting and so on over the Yuletide season into the new year, the members of the police service have been out there with the BDF making sure that our streets were safe. I'm not at all daunted by the fact that there have been unfortunate incidents, but I'm not treating those incidents themselves as being a new spike, and I'm definitely not treating them as indicating a failure of our approach, not at all.
Attorney General, you mentioned police resources being an issue, and some have blamed the slowness within the judicial system to the lack of police resources as it relates to investigators and police officers coming to court. Is something being done to address this and to attract more members into the force? Well,
let me deal with the last bit first. I think in the first year of me becoming Attorney General, the number of police recruits in that particular cohort numbered 18. So there's not a moment of silence just for you to reflect on that number. That in the cohort of 2018, I believe it was, only 18 young Barbadians came forward to join the police force, as it then was. we have just started a new cohort, and the number is 57. Okay? Our cohort for last year, I think, numbered early 40s. So we're making every single effort. You will have seen, I believe, our PR campaign being rolled out. And I know that's not going to be sufficient, but it is an important part of trying to attract our young people to policing as a career. So we're even in a meeting this week with the members of my management team. We've been discussing how we can increase the ability to take in more women in the police service at the training school, because we currently have limitations in terms of numbers. We've increased that in the last week or two, but we want to be able to have a greater intake of women who have been coming forward with great enthusiasm to join the service. So we are making efforts to increase the number of police officers and to eliminate this deficit that has been around probably for 30, 40 years. And the government has given the police service its commitment to the service, but it has also asked that in return for that commitment, we get back within the next 3 or so years, hopefully 2, but more likely 3, to the 1,500 police officers that we've had, that we have allocated. In relation to police officers not coming to court, let me say I'm not sure of your source. I have not heard any complaint from any members of the judiciary, but I am aware that from time to time there will be incidents of police officers not coming to court. From time to time, there are incidents of witnesses not coming to court, but of course, police officers are a special breed, so they got to come because they're the ones doing the prosecution. But, you know, we've always had this particular challenge, and it is a challenge of being, and I'm not trying to excuse misconduct, but it's a challenge of being a human being. And police officers are expected to come to court and give the crispest possible of evidence on a file for a case that they may have investigated 7 or 8 years ago. And they're expected to give it the kind of clarity that many of us have difficulty with after 2 weeks. But that same police officer will probably have been investigating a crime the evening before and had to work all through the night, and then is expected to arrive at a magistrate's court maybe for 9:30, or even at a high court to give evidence. So, you know, a police officer is under a sworn obligation not just to uphold the law, but to uphold the system. And yes, he or she, when required to be at court, must be at court. But I'm saying that just like you or I, they're human beings, and there will be occasions when there's some challenges will arise. Now, I don't know what the specific case that you're speaking of, or specific cases that you're speaking of are, but I'd like you to view them first from a lens of not of recalcitrance, but from a lens of an individual who has an appreciation for the kind of challenges that the police service has to face. So one of those officers who might have been out all night last night working on Operation Restore in the most difficult of circumstances, who might have to show up at court today and give evidence on a matter that 7 years old, you know. So there's some challenges that we face. And, you know, if we had a perfect system, we'd be able to make sure that none of our officers were ever rostered for duty the day before they had to go to court. But I'm afraid we don't have that luxury.
Marlon, you had another question.
And this is the last one?
Is it the last one?
Well, they asked questions before, but I still have addition to it. I want to go back to the first question that Colville asked in relation to the gun incidents that we've been seeing. We made legislative change recently with harsher penalties. So from that perspective, Are you convinced that this law will deter people from doing such? And the second question is in
No,
relation
no,
to
no, let's do the
police
first question first, please. Do the first question first. You know, I really think that sometimes we want to live in a Harry Potter world. No disrespect intended. You know, if I take medication today, it will take some time before the medication. I've had a cough a little bit. I started taking medication a few days ago, but see, I'm still coughing. There is no law the impact of which will be felt from the day after Parliament, after it passes through Parliament. I said there's a Harry Potter world. Now, we pass a law to strengthen the arm of the judiciary. Okay? When appropriate cases get before the judiciary, they will do what they have to do. I've been hoping, and Minister Abrams worked hard with us to make sure that the Public Affairs Section, GAS, publicized that there is a new law. There's a new law with harsher penalties. Okay? They've done exactly the same thing in Jamaica. I watched the Jamaican Police Commissioner and the Jamaican Prime Minister saying, you will get sent to prison for life. And people still get shot the next day. So to expect that the passing of a law will immediately eliminate gun crimes is really fanciful. To expect that passing the integrity legislation will immediately eliminate corruption, similarly fanciful. But the important thing is that we are putting a structure in place that when applied to the appropriate incidents should see the courts being able to send a message to individuals who are involved in crime. Crime will not pay you. You are going to be subject to harsh sentences. And those who help them are also subject to harsh sentences. So I hope the members of the Barbadian public didn't have an anticipation that because we passed the law in November, December, whenever it was, that, you know, the day after, that it will cause gun crime to evaporate and disappear. Far from. I think it would be foolhardy to have that kind of anticipation.
I was asking because a lot of members of the public, they're saying that they feel that they're not safe anymore, and they believe that, you know, this would deter. And I believe that's what you guys were hoping for as well.
Not we're hoping for. We are expecting that. Remember that the penal law is not only about punishing; it's about deterring. Now, I'm not prepared to surrender and do nothing simply because it may not deter one person. How many people in Barbados get told stop eating all that ham fat because you can get something or another? I mean, the doctors make these pronouncements every day, and we're not going to deter everybody. But happily, Minister Abrams and I are keeping fit because we are following our doctor's advice, as are most of you, I can tell. But the point is, you know, that we will not be able to deter everybody, okay? But we believe that there are some people who they say, I did not realize. And if we get one person saying that, if we get one parent who can haul back a chance to listen, you hear what then people put in Parliament, you really want to face this, then we will have begun to score some victories. And that's what I'm hoping for. And as for Barbadians feeling safe, we had queue yesterday in Shorey. Based on what I've heard, there were no incidents. We had queue the week before, no incidents. We came through a Yuletide season without any major issues. Barbados is safe. It is safe. I mean, you're able to go about your business. You know, when I meet people, they tell me, man, you must be the only Attorney General in the Caribbean that is walkable by yourself. Not that I do, that I don't want to. But you understand what I'm saying. The Prime Minister of Barbados moves around Barbados and have always moved around Barbados with relative ease. You don't see people standing up next to us with big guns and so on. But that's what we're trying to preserve. And those people who are trying to take it away from us, don't sit on the sidelines and throw cold water and pot shots. Help us by joining in the fight, because we're protecting not just me or Wilfred, but we're protecting you, and we're protecting generations of Barbadians. I told you in the 70s, the murder rate was up in the 20s. 50 years have passed. I don't think we're doing too bad. We could do a lot better.
Just let me chime in slightly just to explain something. There are two levels of deterrence, right? People keep speaking to, will this deter the person who is intent on shooting somebody else? If you're intent on doing something, there's probably nothing we can do to deter you. But for what I call the more casual criminal, the one who comes in by association, right? I've heard people saying, well, if I hide him or conceal him or pick him up or tell a lie for him, right, I can now be subject to the same penalty that he is? No. So it is not just stopping the crime from happening, it is also the investigation of the crime and bringing persons to justice thereafter. And I think you're probably going to see a lot more of the persons who would put the family member that the police are looking for under the cellar, right? You're going to see a lot less of that happening as people realize that the ancillary offenders, those who help the persons after the fact, those who help them to evade the investigation, evade police capture, that once they realize, I am now potentially looking at the exact same sentence as the person who pulled that trigger, you're going to see a lot less of those cover-ups happening, and it would then assist the police in being able to solve things a lot quicker. So there's deterrence on two different levels. Let's not just only focus on the person who's hell-bent on committing the crime. You will never stop them. You come into play in trying to catch them after the fact. But let's also concentrate as well on the people who facilitate them and help them to evade capture. If a lot of those people are taken out of the picture or are unwilling to do that anymore because of fear of the penalties, then the success rate in solving automatically goes up. So it is not just simple looking at, are we going to stop the person from pulling the trigger? It's how much is this going to help us advance the entire cause to investigate the person, to capture the person, to prosecute the person, and to convict the person. So don't look at it in a silo, look at the overall effect. And I believe that you are going to see a lot more cooperation coming since this legislation has been put in.
One final question.
Yes, I wanted to ask, are there any plans to address issues relating to benefits? I think that was one of the major issues that we have in terms of attracting individuals to the police force.
Yes, remember that the police service is one that operates under specific rules, so they don't have the benefit of a trade union as such. I've been having discussions with the police association, and they have said to me the kinds of things that they're interested in. Obviously, you will know that we're in the middle of a salary negotiation, so there are certain considerations that are before the government. Everybody wants to get more of this, to get more of that. So there are going to be some challenges, but we are looking to recreate how the police service does things. We're looking to to present new career opportunities, significant training. We're looking at civilianizing parts of the police force and introducing new skills and so on. So while I couldn't say that we'll be able to satisfy the request for specific increases in benefits, I think there are a number of things that we're discussing with the police service. And there are opportunities that we're looking to make available to them as a government that I think they welcome and that will take us somewhere along maintaining the attractiveness of serving in the police service.
If there are no further questions, Minister Abrams, closing comments.
As I say, it's good to be back. It's good to be back speaking with you. It's good to be back face to face for the press conferences. And as I indicated, we intend by this process to demystify the whole cabinet procedures and to be able to advise Barbadians in a timely manner the decisions that we have made on your behalf or decisions that we have made that affect you going forward. I just want to manage expectations. Because this is the first one, the AG exercised and gave you a lot of latitude, Colville. But going forward, to make these press conferences work, the press conferences relating the post-cabinet press conferences are going to be limited to the things raised in cabinet, right? And questions relating to that. And I ask the press to work with us on this because, quite frankly, that's the only way it can actually work going forward. We're going to have the press conferences neat at a specific time for a specific period and then allow everybody else to get about their day. So I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for the cooperation that you've shown. And we look forward to working with you to keep the public of Barbados well informed about the operations of government. AG.
You had the last word.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Last word.
Thank you very much, Minister Abrams. That's Minister Wilfred Abrams, the Minister of Home Affairs and Information. We were also joined by the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Dale Marshall, my media colleagues, and thank you so much for joining us. Do have yourself a wonderful Friday.